Ted Lieu didn't just ask a question. He detonated one. The moment he leaned into the microphone and calmly asked, "Have you looked at all the photos in the Epstein files?" The entire room shifted. It was the kind of question that slices straight through rehearsed talking points and lands where officials least want it. Inside the safe. Inside the secrecy. Inside the evidence that still hasn't seen daylight. And if you felt the air tighten watching that moment, you weren't imagining it. Because what came next wasn't a routine exchange. It was the sound of an institution flinching. Ted Lieu understood exactly what he was doing. He wasn't asking for trivia. He was laying a trap. Either the director could confirm he had reviewed the photos.
Again, sir, I'll accept your representation. I don't know.
Thank you. It was all over the media at the time. There's a New York Times article that says Jeffrey Epstein is indicted on sex charges as discovery of nude photos is disclosed, dated July 8th, 2019. And the Times reports a trove of lewd photographs of girls was discovered in a safe inside financier Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion. Author Michael Wolff has conducted numerous interviews of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to play for you a video clip of what Michael Wolff said Epstein told him was in the safe and what he showed the author was in this safe. So let's please play that clip now.
Elected. I was sitting talking to Epstein, and he said, "Wait a minute, I got to show you something." And then he went into his safe, and he came out with photographs. They were Polaroids, I think, and he kind of spread them out like playing cards, and it was Trump. I mean, I think there were a dozen of them, and it was Trump with girls of an uncertain age at Epstein's Palm Beach house, where all of the things that he would ultimately be accused of took place. And I remember very vividly 3 of them. There are 2 in which Trump is, the girls, topless girls, are sitting on Trump's lap. And then a 3rd in which he has a stain on the front of his pants. And the girls are kind of pointing at it, sort of bent over, laughing.
So Director Patel, I'm going to ask you a very broad and general question. As you know, Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein were friends. There are, of course, photos showing Donald Trump together with Epstein, correct?
I don't have the entirety of the photographs, but I think they've been photographed in public together.
All right. Are there any photos showing Donald Trump with girls of an uncertain age?
No,
How do you know that?
because that information would have been brought to light by multiple administrations and FBI investigators over the course of the last 20 years.
Well, you know what? That's just not true, because no one knew about the creepy birthday message that Donald Trump wrote to Jeffrey Epstein until the Wall Street Journal disclosed it, and then all of a sudden, the Epstein estate provides it to Congress.
Well,
so certainly, you weren't there at the search. You don't know what Epstein may or may not have done with those photographs even prior to the search. Maybe someone has it. Maybe the Epstein estate has it.
You raise a great point.
So I'm going to ask you, have you asked to talk to Michael Wolff?
You raise a great point. I haven't personally asked to talk to Michael
Has the FBI asked?
but
you
the
to Michael Wolff?
FBI, I'll get back to you if the FBI specifically
So Michael Wolff
asked
has
ever.
about 100 hours of testimony of Jeffrey Epstein. Wouldn't it be good for the FBI to interview Michael Wolff?
I'm not saying they haven't, I just don't know.
Has FBI subpoenaed the tapes that Michael Wolff has conducted of Jeffrey Epstein?
I don't know.
All right, so if you could provide us an answer, that would be terrific. Sure. Well, let me ask you this question then. Have you looked at all the photos in Epstein files?
I have looked at all the information that the investigators who investigated this case have provided to run out credible leads.
And in the Epstein files, was there that creepy birthday message that Donald Trump had written to Epstein?
No, that's what I was trying to tell you. You raise a great point. The estate of Jeffrey Epstein has a voluminous amount of information that they have not released before.
Okay, so that's great. So wouldn't it be great if FBI subpoenaed the estate of Jeffrey Epstein for all that information?
The estate is under no obligation to provide that material, even pursuant to a subpoena. That's a great point.
Yeah, that's just false.
Okay.
That's just false. You're the frickin' FBI. You can subpoena the information from the estate, and you better do that.
That's literally not how it works.
I'm going to move on now and talk about Epstein's client list. You confirmed that it exists. Attorney General Pam Bondi confirmed earlier this year that it exists. So I just want to ask you a simple question. Is Prince Andrew on Epstein's client list?
The material related to Prince Andrew has been made public.
Is Prince Andrew on the client list?
We have released the index of names
All right,
that were in Jeffrey Epstein's.
Is Donald Trump on Epstein's client list?
The index has been released, and the index will speak for
So I'm
itself.
just going to say, America, there's a huge red flag. The FBI director could not answer
Gentlemen.
whether Donald Trump was on Epstein's
Gentleman's time
client
has
list.
expired.
I
Chair
yield
now
back.
recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the director for being here and for his
Opening the door to accountability, where he could dodge the question, revealing how many cracks still exist in the wall between the public and the truth. The director chose the dodge, and that's when everything spiraled, because the truth is, this story didn't begin at that hearing. It began years earlier, in a private room where an author sat across from Jeffrey Epstein himself. Rumors suggest Epstein walked into his safe, returned with a stack of old Polaroids, and spread them out like playing cards. The author described the images as involving an extremely well-known figure and girls of uncertain age. And whether those claims are exaggerated, distorted, or accurate, one thing is undeniable. They ignited a question that investigators still can't clearly answer, which is why Ted Lieu asked it again. Have you looked at all the photos? Not some. Not the carefully curated set. All of them. And the hesitation that followed didn't just feel uncomfortable. It felt revealing. Because if the files truly contain nothing extraordinary, why can't anyone give a simple yes? Why do officials talk around the evidence instead of through it? Why does every path seem to lead to a fog of legal phrases, procedural shields, and missing pieces? That's where this story deepens. Because once you zoom out from that exchange, you begin to see the larger pattern. The safe in Manhattan, the images described in media reports, the discs labeled with names, the boxes of photos seized by agents, the personal notes, the tapes, the logs, the messages, the testimonies that were never fully released. Every one of those elements paints a picture of a case that was never handled like an ordinary case. And Ted Lieu pressed on that pressure point harder than anyone has in years. The FBI searched Epstein's properties in 2019. They seized a safe. They seized photographs. They seized notebooks, disks, drives, documents, enough material to fill multiple rooms. But here's the strange part. Even today, no one can clearly outline the exact chain of custody for all those items. Some materials were sealed. Some were moved. Some were transferred. Some were redacted. Some were withheld at the request of the estate. And some, according to officials, were never seen at all. That's what makes Liu's questions so sharp. They force investigators to admit, on the record, what they have and have not examined. Because let's be honest, everybody knows that Epstein's circle wasn't populated by random nobodies. It was a who's who of the elite. World leaders, celebrities, billionaires, scientists, princes, financiers, tech moguls. Some relationships were casual. Some were transactional. Some were purely social. And some, according to survivors, were darker. That complexity is exactly why investigators should have complete clarity about what evidence exists. But when Lieu asked whether the photos contained a certain former president, the director didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He didn't say, I've personally reviewed them, or I can confirm what's in them. Instead, he leaned on a vague assumption that multiple administrations would have brought it to light. That's not an answer. That's a hope. And hope isn't evidence that's when Lieu began to pivot. If the director didn't know what was in the safe, then maybe the estate still held undisclosed material. So Lieu asked about subpoenas. Had the FBI requested everything? Had they demanded the tapes? The interviews? The archives? The director's answer was a maze of uncertainty. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you. The estate isn't obligated. It felt less like a confident briefing and more like someone trying to navigate a filing cabinet that no one has opened in years. That gap is exactly where conspiracy theories grow. And it's exactly what high-profile survivors say has been happening for decades. Every time officials hesitate, every time answers stay vague, every time evidence remains sealed, people fill the silence with suspicion. And that suspicion isn't coming out of nowhere. For years, victims have said they were ignored. Lawyers have said files were buried. Journalists have said leads went cold for reasons that don't make sense to us. When Ted Lieu asked whether the FBI had interviewed the author who claimed to see the photos, and the director answered, I don't know. It hit like a thunderclap. How is it possible that a person who claims to have seen the images firsthand might never have been questioned? How does an agency running one of the most sensitive investigations in modern history not know whether a key witness was interviewed? Either that's a procedural oversight or something much more troubling. And the moment Lieu pointed out that the estate of the financier had handed over a mysterious birthday note only after being pressured by journalists, it exposed a bigger issue. If one piece of evidence can surface years later, what else hasn't been revealed? What else is sitting in boxes? What else is locked away in safes, storage units, servers, or handwritten folders? That uncertainty grows when you look at the so-called index that was released. The list wasn't the infamous client list people imagined. Instead, it was a set of names collected over years: visitors, associates, staff, acquaintances, business contacts, friends of friends. A chaotic database with no clean context. And yet, when Lieu asked the director if certain individuals were on the true client list, the real list, the answers turned cloudy again. No direct comment. The index speaks for itself. The material regarding certain individuals has been made public. But here's the problem. If the index speaks for itself, why doesn't it answer the question? If everything is already public, why not say whether specific names were included? Why do simple yes or no questions turn into three-sentence evasions? That dynamic is what's fueling the public's frustration. People aren't demanding unredacted images. They're demanding clarity. They're demanding honesty. They're demanding to know whether the investigators did their jobs fully or whether the powerful were insulated once again behind legal glass. And Ted Lieu's calm but relentless questioning brought that tension to the surface, because this isn't about a single photo. It's about a pattern, a system, a structure of power that has, for decades, protected the wealthy at the expense of the vulnerable. Survivors say their stories were ignored. Prosecutors say deals were cut. Journalists say evidence vanished. And now, members of Congress say the agencies responsible for transparency aren't giving straight answers. When Lieu pressed about whether subpoenas were used against the estate, the director responded with legal uncertainty, as if one of the most powerful investigative bodies in the world somehow lacked the authority to demand evidence. And that's where Lieu's anger cracked through. Because if investigators can't even confirm whether they've requested all materials, what does that say about the integrity of the entire case? It says the system is broken. It says survivors deserved better. It says the truth is still buried under layers of procedure, hesitation, and selective secrecy. And what makes it worse is that every year that passes makes it harder to trace what really happened. Photos fade. Memories shift. Hard drives degrade. Estates reorganize. Files are misplaced, sealed, or forgotten. Evidence without urgency becomes evidence without meaning. And that's the heart of Ted Lieu's outrage. He wasn't grandstanding. He was exposing the quiet rot of delay that he was forcing the director to confront a reality that audiences already know. When powerful people are involved, the process slows to a crawl. Suddenly, documents can't be found. Interviews can't be confirmed. Safes become mysteries. Witnesses don't recall. Entire agencies hide behind legal jargon. And victims are told to wait for the process. But the process has been the problem. That's why this moment matters more than the clip itself. Because every time an official stumbles over a basic question, did you see the photos? Did you subpoena the tapes? Did you interview the witness? The public learns what survivors have been saying since the beginning. Accountability doesn't come naturally. It has to be dragged out, and Ted Lieu dragged. He pulled the curtain back on a system that prefers silence over clarity. And his questions left officials with nowhere to hide. Not behind procedure, not behind technicalities, not behind vague references to multiple administrations. Because if the truth were simple, the answers would be simple. If the files contained nothing alarming, the director would say so clearly. If every photo was reviewed, he'd have the confidence to confirm it. But he didn't. And that hesitation is why this moment is now echoing across the entire conversation about the case. Where does this leave us? It leaves us with a story that is still unfolding. A story where survivors still wait for full transparency. A story where Congress may push harder, issue subpoenas, demand sworn statements, and force the agencies to account for every disc, every photo, every tape, every witness. A story where the safe still looms like a symbol of the secrets the public has never been allowed to see. And a story where Ted Lieu asked the most important question of all, not what's in the photos, but whether the people responsible for them have actually looked. Because that answer tells you everything you need to know, not about the photos themselves, but about the system behind them. If you want to follow this story as it develops, see who keeps dodging, who finally answers, and which files come to light next. Make sure to hit subscribe, drop a like, and turn on notifications. This case is far from over, and the next twist might be the one that changes everything.